Welcome to Inside the Set with Set Decor. Inside the Set is a series that focuses on the design and decor of stories that excite us and ignite our imaginations, where we get to discuss the collaborations between production designers and set decorators, and hear firsthand accounts of how those works of art came to be, from their inception to ideas on the page through completion, where we sit in the dark and experience them collectively.
Welcome to Inside the Set with Set Decor. My name is Susan Benjamin. I am a longtime member of the Set Decorator Society of America, and I am so pleased today to be here talking with the set decorator Cécile Deleu and production designer Emmanuelle Duplay to discuss their incredibly imaginative and collaborative and groundbreaking film, Emilia Pérez. So welcome to you. I just want to start by saying how thrilled I am to be here, and congratulations on all the accolades that you're receiving and the film is receiving. And it seems like the two of you are on a roll, because this is the second year where you've had a very well-received film in the film festival circuit. So hopefully, you'll continue on your partnership together.
We are working together since a long time, yes. Nearly 20 years.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So you have a shorthand together. That's very, very wonderful. Yeah, you can kind of see it, because I felt like the sets were really seamless. I felt like they were so easy. So I guess what I want to say, they were just so easy to the eye. There was nothing pretentious about them. I believed them, even though we were in sort of a fantasy world. So my first question for you is, I just wanted to tell you that I don't like to find out anything about a film before I go see it. So when I saw Emilia Pérez, I really didn't know anything. So I was extremely surprised at the very beginning when we meet Manitas and what his request is, which I loved. And then I was even more surprised at the end when I found out, I was looking through the credits, that you really didn't shoot all that much in Mexico, but that you show it mostly on a stage outside of Paris. So I wanted to ask you, now that I've seen the film several times, and I've actually been at the Academy and I've seen Jacques speak, I wanted to find out from the two of you when you were actually brought into the process.
Alors, je peux peut-être commencer. Ouais, oui. Voilà. Ben, en fait, tout au début,
I'll start. At the very beginning, we did go to Mexico quite a few times to do location scoutings, because at that point we were supposed to shoot there. And so we did real location work there. In fact, we had found nearly all of our sets. And then an issue came up with an actress's availability, and we went back to Paris. There was a delay. And it was at that point that Jacques Audiard started to say to himself that he might want to shoot the film in, shall we say, a more abstract way. And that's when we made the decision to shoot in a studio.
Were you happy about that decision? Did you feel that you could have more control over the sets that way, or were you upset that you thought maybe you'd lose some of the flavor of Mexico?
No, I was really happy, because I think in studio, I work really often in studio, and I think you can express things maybe more strongly in studio.
Yes, and it's easier even for me, and it was nicer for me, because if it were shooting in Mexico, I was staying in Paris. So I was very pleased of that
Yes,
decision.
I'm sure. I understand. So did you get to travel as well, Cecile, to Mexico City?
No, I've never been to Mexico City.
Oh my goodness. Did you do any shopping? Like, how did you
well, I continue in French. It's easier for me. Sorry. J'ai travaillé avec une fille régisseuse d'extérieur qui habite à Mexico City et qui a fait un travail formidable. On a beaucoup travaillé via Zoom, et c'est elle qui a acheté. Elle a trouvé beaucoup de choses qui nous ont beaucoup aidé.
So I worked with a young woman who lives in Mexico City, who's an outside prop person or buyer, and she really did great work for us. We collaborated, she and I, on Zoom, and she bought a lot of things that really helped create this market, the tarps and so on. She sent us a whole container of things. It was a great collaboration thanks to all these different things she found in Mexico City, these consumables that are typical objects and posters, urban furniture. She worked really well for us.
Yeah, that showed. I think for me, what really showed was that you had a lot of Mexico, certainly in the street scenes, but even you had touches, you didn't overkill it. You just had what was needed. And I didn't feel like you were overkilling the Mexico City. You know, I felt like you know, sometimes when you're not actually on a location, you have a tendency to want to sell it that much more. And I just felt like, other than, you know, the street scene, which was pretty authentic, that you really held back. And so I really commend you on that, because I know that's really hard to do. So the other thing I wanted to ask both of you is that I've done comedies, and I know how difficult that can be to design and decorate for comedies because they have their own choreography. So I wanted to know how you approached this, because you had many factors. You had choreography and singing. You also had a dose of realism, but then not so real. So you really had to do your own choreography to find that sweet spot. And I wanted to know what were your influences and how you approached that.
Bah, la chose, c'est qu'on a absolument dessiné tous les stands. On les a tous dessinés entièrement fabriqués, et on les a fabriqués justement avec, enfin, en dialogue.
So the thing is that we designed every single stand. They were totally fabricated by us. And this fabrication was very much in dialogue with the choreographer Damien Jallet, because the stands were choreographed to be able to open, close. So Cecile and I really worked to create these stands so that they would serve the choreography.
How long were you on this before filming actually began?
Assez longtemps. Et surtout, dès le début, on a travaillé beaucoup le marché, parce que Damien et ses danseurs...
It took quite a long time. Especially, we were working on the market from the very beginning, because Damien Jallet and his dancers were rehearsing in a studio. And so at first we needed to provide them with a little bit of stuff, and then more and more and more. So we worked on that for a month and a half before the shoot. And I think I came on to prep about 4 months before, and at least a month of that was spent exclusively on the market.
I can see why. So I think that is Back to the Facts. That's the clip from Back to the Facts that you were just showing. So that was what you were referring to, was everything that happened in the market. So
Yeah.
again, you hadn't been there, so you had to research everything. Did this person who you had in Mexico, the outside prop person or the outside buyer, were they able to send you photos of real Mexican markets to help inspire you?
I was in Mexico scouting with Jacques, so we have been to several markets in Mexico. So it was also, of course, inspired by reality.
Yeah.
Except that we changed a little bit the colors to be more in our artistic direction, but it was inspired from reality also.
Yes,
Mhm.
and in the internet you have a lot of pictures of Mexican markets, so you can pick things in different places.
Yeah, I was going to say, so it looks like you really controlled the colors that you had here. So then also, because I said that I hadn't seen this before and I tried hard not to read anything about it, I was really impressed too with your choice for the courtroom that then moved into, you know, I guess the "Why Did He Call Me" clip. And you have where you're dancing, where it's, you know, Zoe is. But so I guess my question is, again, I wasn't sure where this movie was going, and I loved the courtroom, that we weren't in a traditional courtroom. I thought that was really great. And then it opened up into this, you know, whole different set. And then I just loved it, because I was taken into another reality. This wasn't going to be just your typical movie. This opened up a whole new number, new colors, new lighting, new kinds of music. And so I was ready to go on the ride. So tell me what your inspiration or how you decided you came up with this set from the courtroom to the, diner.
Ah, ça, on est passé par pas mal d'étapes.
So we went through many stages with this. We really were looking for a long time. I'm not sure that you can really see this in the clip, but the light is very low. The lights are very low and always moving. So the set is very structured, of course. It's marble and black and white, but the light took on an exceptional importance with this.
Yeah, so I can see that every set you had to work very, very closely with the director of photography. So I guess Emmanuelle, you were on for a long time before our filming actually began then. I saw that Jacques was prepping us for 6 years. How long were you actually on this project?
Oui, moi, j'étais à l'époque en train de tourner Anatomie.
At the time, I was shooting Anatomy of a Fall with Cécile, and there was one moment where we had a little bit of time, and so I went to Mexico City with Jacques Audiard. I worked for about a year and a half on this film.
So was this a first time for you doing choreography, a dance musical in your career?
No. Non, j'ai fait une comédie.
So I did a French musical, actually, which was partially shot in a studio where we had recreated a street from a Paris neighborhood, the outdoor parts, in the studio. This film is called Toi, moi, les autres, You, Me, and the Others, a French film which I don't think was released in the United States.
Mais it's the first time I do something, this kind of musical.
All kinds of new I don't want to say problems, but solutions you need to come up with that you haven't thought of before. So yeah, I also wanted to talk about the colors, because the color red plays so prevalently, and obviously that's a very as far as Spanish goes, it's a very sensual, a very hot color. But I wanted to ask you, because it seemed to me like you had very specific choices about where this color was being used. And was that also something that Jacques had a lot of opinions about, or was that you just kind of taking the lead with it all?
Ben, j'ai le sentiment que quand on se dit qu'on est à Mexico, on est obligé d'avoir de la couleur. Enfin, moi, ça m'intéressait beaucoup d'avoir de la couleur.
I have the feeling that when you know you're going to be working in Mexico City, you absolutely have to have color. Certainly on my part, I was very interested in having color, and I always wanted to have strong colors for all the sets. So for instance, in Emilia's house, you have the fuchsia, Epifania, it's blue, and so every single set has these strong Mexican colors.
When you're talking about that courtroom, your use of color was so strong in every single set. That was black and white. And when she goes to Switzerland, it's very white. And, the transitions are very white. And then, and even the scene in the restaurant in London is such a pivotal moment, and how everything just kind of fades to black. And yes, can you talk about the evolution of that scene?
On est passé par beaucoup de phases pour ce décor.
So we went through a lot of different phases for this set of the restaurant, and in choosing the colors. Ultimately, we went with a lot of gold. It's shiny, there's a lot of points of gold. And then Emmanuelle said the set needed to express Rita's success. Now she's become a big shot lawyer. And so as soon as we saw Rita and Emilia reunited, we needed to see that she has gone to a much, much higher level in her career.
And then so this choice of that screen behind with the gold, the light coming through. I mean, it's such a beautiful backdrop. I just really loved it, because it also had this feeling of like street lights, and still, kind of, I just felt like it was in keeping, even though the color was a little bit different. It felt like it still had the same, the same language from where, where Emilia had come from. There was still like a little bit of the street back there.
En fait, c'était un rideau de LED. C'était un rideau de LED. Ouais.
It was an LED curtain.
Avec Paul Guillaume, le chef opérateur.
So in working with Paul Guillaume, the director of photography of the film, we looked at a lot of different kinds of curtains like this one, and ultimately we chose this one because you could really adjust it. You could really work on it and have different effects from it. The lighting in this film, the principle for it was that it would change quite radically all the time. So for instance, Paul Guillaume, the DP, constantly had his hand on changing the lights live. And so our sets needed to accommodate constantly modulable lighting.
So how did you adjust to that, Cecile? How did you choose colors? How did you choose what decor you put in when the lighting was changing all the time?
Ah, c'est compliqué aujourd'hui avec l'apparition des LED, les nouvelles façons d'éclairer. Mais au final, la lumière ne changeait pas tant que ça. Parce que, par exemple, dans la villa...
It's complex today with LEDs coming onto the market and so many new ways of lighting. But actually, I found that on this film, the lighting did not change that much. So for instance, Emilia's villa, there's night and day. As far as I see it, the only real live changing of the light is in the restaurant.
Yeah, well, certainly the first part of the film in darkness was a lot of, you had to choose your lights. I mean, I find now, like you're saying, there's so much with the LED lighting and there's so much done on camera that I find that I spend an inordinate amount of time working with the DP to make sure all of my practical lights are working, because we often end up lighting the set with our practical lighting. But when you got to that restaurant scene, it seemed to me like you were doing both, that you were lighting both from, practical lighting, but then you were actually using a scrim as a lighting source. So you were playing with all of these techniques, which I also found really intriguing. And which I love the fantasy. I love that you kind of, through this, you were going back and forth between realism and fantasy and the story and where you were. So I really love that. And then when you got to Mexico, everything was bright and sunny, the new life had begun, except for when you got to Estefania's house, which really stood out for me as a set decorator. Because as great as every other, I guess it was that and the office that they opened. What do you call it? La Lucita. Yes, La Lucita. But here is Estefania's apartment. And the thing that I loved about this was this felt real to me. You didn't see so much of the bed on screen. You saw more of the kitchen scene. And I really felt like I was in Mexico and this was like real life. And not Rita, but Emilia was finally having this moment where she didn't have to be flashy. She didn't have to be protected. This was kind of like the real Mexico. And there was just something so sweet and simple and lovely about this set that really resonated with me. Can you talk about this set? Because I know that you have a great time doing these sets, but this is one of those sets where I could see a lot of people having opinions about it.
Non, c'est vrai que ce décor, c'est vraiment quelque chose dont on s'est inspiré d'un décor réel qu'on avait.
No, it's true. This set was actually inspired by a real location that I saw with Jacques Audiard in Mexico City, in a very poor neighborhood in Mexico City, where in fact we had to be accompanied by a security person to make sure that we would be okay. And so we came across this place by going up a little staircase at the far end of an alley, and we came across this blue house. And I took a lot of photos, and then when we returned to Paris to the studio, Cécile reinterpreted it.
Yes. Et pour ma part, bon, c'est vrai qu'il y avait des photos assez précises d'une ambiance.
For myself, I had quite precise photographs that conveyed an atmosphere with all these colors. And these are the kind of sets that I really love to work on, because you find everything by going into flea markets and really digging around. There's not a single new fabric in this set, and there's all these different objects that had to be found, that were brought together from all different places, that make this mass of small objects that actually come together really well. This is really my favorite kind of set to do. I have so much fun doing it because you have so many small details and so many fabrics.
Well, it absolutely shows because it's so beautiful, it's so personable. I mean, it just really makes you love Estefania and just want to be there, just like Emilia wanted to just be there. It was really lovely. And then also, I in the same way that you love doing these sets, the Emilia's home, that's not always such an easy set to do either, because now you're back in Mexico, and you're trying to show who Emilia has now become, and they walk in the door, and so you're really trying to create who this person is now, or who this aunt is now. So that must have been a difficult set to really find. Can you talk about the process of that and how you both landed where you did?
Me, I'm an architect, so I like a lot to design spaces. That's really something what interests me a lot. And for this interior, we were thinking about Barragan. The inspiration was of this really famous Mexican architect. And after we... Enfin, voilà, à toi.
Ouais. Et après, donc, on a décidé de mettre des couleurs quand même assez fortes.
Well, we decided that we would put quite strong colors in Emilia's house, but it's still relatively monochrome between the curtains, the couches, the wall. And curiously, this is a set that I was able to do quite fast, in part because there was a lot of work to do, and also good luck. With Emmanuelle, we had talked about having a big couch, round, orange, or fuchsia, and I found it very fast. I think that sometimes knowing what you want or having the desire provokes the good luck. So neither the couch nor the armchairs had to be reupholstered or covered over with other fabrics. I found all these objects in the flea markets in Paris that offer quite a lot. So I was able to source all this quite fast.
That's amazing. But yeah, research is really a key factor in what we do. I find, it doesn't matter. You can become an expert at anything. And then you've looked at all the photographs, and then you really understand what it is you're looking for, so that when you do go to a flea market, you're looking at a million objects, but you're able to hone in exactly on what it is you want, because you've done so much research. And I imagine by this time you really knew your characters. I really love the set. I love the Luis Barragan. It was totally influenced. I have been to Mexico City. I've been there, and I was really excited to see it. And I loved the colors that you chose. I was thrilled with the boldness of the colors. And that, they don't seem to overtake. If anything, they, like you said, because they're all the same color, a color like this could really overtake every scene, but because of the way it's all in a very limited palette, it really works. And it really, all of your artwork and all of your choices really are able to stand out beautifully. Again, they contrast beautifully with the wall colors. And what about the art? Because I also, I can see some photography references, some Mexican photographers and some of these sets. So what were your influences? What was the artwork? Where did you get that? And what was your inspiration for those pieces?
Encore une fois, des envies de couleurs, surtout. Et puis j'ai rencontré dans une galerie une artiste où je trouvais qu'il y avait des toiles qui étaient dans leur
So once again, what was especially driving us was the desire for color. And then I met an artist in a gallery, and I thought that her canvases, both in their shape and color, were appropriate. These are the green paintings that you can see in the background, and she was really excited to loan us works, so that worked out. And then a lot of it was, again, from going to flea markets, from going to secondhand places. I really work with my instinct a lot. So a lot of this is just walking around, going to secondhand places, going to flea markets, and things just seem obvious then. It's really having encounters with paintings and objects. I don't really know how else to say it. I'm not so used to talking about it.
Yeah, we're usually running around behind the scenes, so that's why we have this set decor magazine, because there's so much that goes into it that it's hard to describe. We're just so used to doing it, but there aren't that many of us that actually do it. So we're trying to show people kind of the magic that we do. But yeah, I imagine, Emmanuelle, you had many conversations with the costume designer, because those are pretty bold colors, and both Jessie and Rita are in muted, white and beige. I would imagine there's a lot of choreography between your departments.
Yeah, yes, of course, because Virginie Montel was at the same time the costume designer and the artistic director of the whole movie. So there was a lot of discussion between us three, Cécile, Virginie, and me, about all that, of course.
So I've only worked with production designer and art director. How is it working with an artistic director? Is that somebody who's coordinating the choreography, the song? How does that work? How is that position?
C'était un travail un petit peu global qu'elle faisait sur le film, en discussion avec Jacques, sur
It was basically a general, global, overall work on the film that Virginie Montel did, in discussion with Jacques Audiard. So she was paying attention to makeup, choreography, the lighting, the sets, and it was really a question of bringing ideas, talking with us. It was really an exchange.
It's nice that you had one person to coordinate, because that kind of would save you from having to seek everybody out. You had one person to go to, as opposed to trying to find out. I always find like I find myself running into different departments, because I want to, especially if I'm using bright colors like you were using, I want to make sure that the costume designer's aware of what we're thinking. So it's nice to have, I could see how that could be really, really helpful on a film like this that has so many different elements.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Et puis, on allait régulièrement aussi, de la même manière, voir les costumes, on échangeait beaucoup de photos.
So, in the same sense, we regularly went to see the costumes, we traded photos, and this was also with Virginie, since she was also the costume designer. So we really had a lot of back and forth, but I think this is true of most films.
Yes. But like I said, I've worked production designer and art director. I've never had anybody called the artistic. I haven't worked on a film personally that had an artistic director like that. So that I would find that really interesting and refreshing. So yeah, so that was actually one of my questions, so you answered for me. The other sets, you had mentioned that, I know that you also had to, Korea and Tel Aviv, but I wanted to talk a little bit about that set in Bangkok. I mean, you had the Bangkok clinic, and it was a 2-story set, it looked like, right? And that whole choreography of that set, now again, very bold choice, very white, very stark, very contrasting. And so what was the concept? How did you come up with this, and how is that executed?
Au départ, on avait repéré, quand on devait tourner à Mexico, on avait repéré une clinique qui
At
était
first, when we were still supposed to do the shoot in Mexico City and we were location scouting, we had found a clinic that was round on several levels. And so that idea came back to Paris with us from Mexico when we decided to shoot in a studio. Of course, here we just did it on one level because we were in a soundstage, but Damien Jallet, the choreographer, who had also been with us in Mexico City, used the round nature of the set to create a choreography for the song.
It was so successful because how are you going to shoot a clinic, really? So I thought it was really clever. I really loved the way you do it. And also I just loved, in invoking, it was more of, the cacophony of the theater in the round and all the different influences. So I really loved that you were kind of, I just loved every part of this movie. I mean, even for me, the beginning of the movie, I was like, oh my God, it's like West Side Story. The beginning, you hear the sound of the city, and now you're going in, and I just loved so many different parts. So did you have fun? I mean, did this kind of did this give you a freedom, the two of you, in your design and in your decorating, when you started to realize that anything goes, in a way that it had a form, but you still had freedom to create within that form? I mean, you had a lot of leeway in where you could go. So it could go either way, where you have a lot of freedom and it's overwhelming and scary, or you have a lot of freedom and it's really exciting. So I wanted to ask you about that process of working with Jacques.
Oh. Je pense que Emmanuelle, tu t'en parles mieux que moi, mais on a une liberté, évidemment. En tout cas, moi, dans le choix des meubles, des choses comme ça, plus de liberté que dans il était très présent quand même en préparation, Jacques. C'est-à-dire que
I think Emmanuelle is better at talking about this than I am, but we obviously had freedom. For myself, the choice of furniture and so on, there was a lot of freedom. Having said that, however, Jacques was very present in prep. We did a lot of talking, notably about the actual design and architecture of each set. And then when it came to me with each different part, for instance, the clinic, I knew that it had to be very white. Everything had to be white and everything had to be mobile. Everything had to always be able to move. And that was relatively complicated. And then Damien Jallet kept adding dancers and asking for more things. But nonetheless, we did have freedom.
Moi, si je peux parler de notre travail, en fait, ce qui a été vraiment très intéressant, c'est que avant la préparation officielle du film,
Well, to talk about our work, what I found interesting in this particular case is that before we started on the official prep for the film, we had 1 month of pre-prep after we returned from Mexico City. And what we did is we read the screenplay with Virginie Montel and Paul Guillaume, and we took apart the screenplay scene by scene, asking ourselves what we wanted to see for each scene. And this is something I had never done before with any other director. Generally the read is 1 day. You read the screenplay in a day. This lasted for a month. And every morning we would read scenes trying to figure out what the essence of the scene was and what we wanted to represent visually.
It really shows, because as much as was going on, there was nothing that stood out, nothing that shouldn't have been there. There was a lot, but there was nothing extraneous, which is amazing, I thought. So I wanted to say that I had the good fortune of working with a production designer for a long time, and I wanted to talk about your collaboration, because I find that it's rare to find somebody that you can work with for such a long period of time, and you develop a shorthand with each other, but you're also you can get to know each other too well, and then sometimes you can have a freedom to try things that you didn't try because you trust the other person to steer you in a direction or pull you back if you've gone too far in a direction. Or I just for myself, I love the collaboration, and I was wondering how you two work together after all these years.
Comment travailler? On se connaît très bien, je crois.
We don't do all the film together. That's a good thing.
No.
Because we made both film not together, then we make one together.
Mais malgré tout, on se connaît. Moi, je sais lire les pensées.
We know each other very well, I think. I know how to read Emmanuelle's mind, but I think I also know how to surprise her often. It's actually quite an easy collaboration. We don't butt heads.
You don't ever bat, you don't ever come.
No, jamais. No, never. No, impossible.
That's rare. And Emmanuelle?
I don't know what to say. I think, je pense que c'est ce qu'elle fait est toujours formidable. Donc je sais pas.
I think what she does is always great, so I really don't know what to say.
So when you were creating La Chichita, to me, I thought you were in Mexico. I thought for sure you were in Mexico on that set. I really loved it. I could see it. I feel like I've been to places like that before. And then also I was wondering why you chose to go upstairs to get there, to get to the offices. And then there was another part that I really loved next to Emilia. There was like the Virgin Mary on the wall. And I loved that because you didn't overplay all of that, but it was so perfectly Mexican, and I was like, I couldn't believe when I found out that set of all was not done in Mexico. So where were you filming that particular set?
In fact, on a fait ça in our preparation office. We did that in our preparation office. And we did 2 sets in our preparation office in the suburb of Paris. We did the Berlinger office, the green office where she buys plane tickets. And we did, on the other part, we did the Luchechita. So that was really, but Cécile worked a lot on it.
Yeah, I worked a lot, but je dois dire que le tableau de la Vierge est à Emmanuelle. L'a acheté à Mexico.
I have to say that the painting of the Virgin Mary belongs to Emmanuelle. She was very pleased with herself to come back with it from Mexico City and give it to me to put on the set. And with La Luchicita, it's the same kind of thing. It's the kind of set that comes quite naturally to me. There are parts of the set that one doesn't really see very well in the film. There was a sewing workshop, a cafeteria, and it seems dumb to say, but sets like this for me are so fun to do when you have some inspiration from images from Mexico that it really comes quite naturally. I love to do sets where you're gleaning from life, whether it's going to flea markets and so on, and the furniture. The office itself is quite sober.
Well, I don't really have all that much more to say other than I really love this film. It really spoke to me on so many levels. I found it so refreshing and new, and I enjoyed it so much, and I'm so glad that it's receiving all the accolades and that people are receiving it with the same feeling that I'm having. And it looks like the same feeling that you put into it, because it really seemed like a labor of love from every department, from everybody involved. And also it's making me want people to see how nice it is that you can have a month prep on a set before you even start and actually have time to collaborate together, and that you don't need so much money if you give a little bit more time to really hone in on the things that it is you want the most. And I hope that people can take that away from this interview as well. I mean, I'm sure it was a gift for you. You haven't had that before, and it sounds like it was really a gift.
Yeah.
Yes,
completely.
we think so. Yes.
Yeah.
Really amazing to do. And very interesting, and Et après, ce que Jacques aussi apporte, et il a un talent.
And there's also what Jacques Audiard brings. He has an incredible talent to bring things together, and it was really a beautiful experience.
I'm so happy for the two of you, but it really showed on camera. So this sounds like one of those projects that will be hard to compete with to ever be as wonderful again. Well, I want to thank the two of you. It's really quite an honor to meet both of you. I really loved your work. I loved your work on this film. I loved Anatomy of the Fall as well. I'm going to start to look at all your other films. And it's really been a pleasure. And again, thank you for sharing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Nice.
Yes, it was really nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. I hope to meet you in person someday.
Oh, yes. Hope so.
Wonderful. What are you working on now, the two of you?
We're working on together.
Yes.
Yes. On the serial for HBO, a French serial, and we have to make a palace, a huge hotel. Palace is a French Parisian palace. So we make all the rooms, the suite, the huge lobby, and like that. It will be it's in Brie-sur-Marne, the same set than where we did the film of Jacques, and voilà, we're on that.
That's so nice.
This is a really hard job for me.
Well, please, I hope you come to LA for the ADG Awards, and I hope I get to meet you then.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Well, thank you once again for a wonderful discussion between the production designer and set decorator of Emilia Pérez. If you haven't seen this film on Netflix, it's streaming now, but I highly recommend you go to the theaters, as it's just a wonderful cacophony of colors and music, and I know that you are going to love it. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Inside the Set with Set Decor. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit our website, setdecor.com.